This.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, whether you're joining us on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing World. Unfortunately, today, our dear friend Red Access is not going to be able to moderate the live chat, but today's conversation, in my opinion, is deeply personal one and an important one. We often analyze geopolitics, military strategy, and foreign policy here on Syriana Analysis. But behind all those headlines are real people, communities who have carried the weight of wars they didn't start and losses they didn't deserve. Joining me today is Hibbah Jarmakani, a Syrian researcher and activist originally from Suweida, who has been documenting the experiences of Syria's Druze community from the early hopes of 2011 to the horrors that followed and the erasure of Syria's identity under extremist rule. We will talk about what it meant to grow up as a Syrian before the war, how faith and culture shaped everyday life, and how it all changed when violence, sectarianism, and foreign interference took hold. We will also discuss the shocking crimes committed against the Syrian Druze, the symbolism of humiliation, and the painful question of what still makes someone Syrian today. So stay with us. This is not just a story about one community. It is a story about the soul of Syria itself. And before we begin, I want to remind everyone watching, if you value independent journalism and independent voices and thoughtful conversations like this, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Syriana Analysis. It really helps me fight censorship and reach more people with stories that matter. Hibbah, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happy that I watched this video at the beginning, that some of the detainees were released in Suweida by the Julani regime. I want to go back with you a little bit in, let's say, in recent history. I think we are both old enough to remember how all this started. But let's start with, for listeners meeting you for the first time, right? What did home or homeland look and feel like for you growing up? Family rhythms, school, the Suweida city, and what being Druze meant day to day for you?
So, for me, I grew up in America, but my family frequently would visit Syria, primarily in the summertime, and we'd stay for months at a time. And I grew up in a family where being Druze was more of a cultural identity than it was a religious one. My father raised us on the principle that the Druze religion developed out of Islam. So he stressed the importance that, if somebody asks you, you are Muslim because that's your history. That's the reality of the situation. And his father before him raised him to believe that religion and governance are two separate things. My grandfather was a general in the Syrian military. And he had a lot of pride in being Syrian and being Arab. So for my family, being of the Syrian identity was to unite Arabs, not seek differences along denominations. And when we would go to Suweida, I personally would never be asked the question, what is your denomination? What is your sect? I know that my parents had been exposed to that a little bit growing up, but at my time in visiting Syria, I did not experience that personally. And if I was, you can recognize my accent in Arabic as being from the south. So people knew that I was Druze, but that's as far as that went. And it was normal life. I mean, you would walk the streets at night, you go to coffee shops, you eat bizir. It's very normal life. And that's the Syria that I knew. That's the Syria that I was familiar with.
We share a few, let's say, few things in what you mentioned. One of which is my father was not an officer in the Syrian army, but he served in the military as a compulsory, let's say, national service. And this is the moment that he believes that he developed his collective Syrian identity, being integrated with many, let's say, communities in the Syrian society are all serving in the military, right? So you meet with new people, new cultures, new religions, but then you leave the military as having a certain perception about others. And in my opinion, this is very important because many people, as we say in Arabic, al-insan adu ma yajhalahu, which means a human being is the enemy of something that is ignorant about. And in this case, many people do not know what Druze is and what the Druze practices are and who are they. So during these recent hostilities, I have heard crazy conspiracies about the Druze and how they would justify basically slaughtering a human being because he was born into the wrong religion, right? According to this Takfiris. But before the war, how did you experience being Syrian? Like, what were the hopes and the small joys you associated with Syria back then? Like, for example, there are certain events, like certain music, certain accent, as you mentioned. When you hear it, you feel like you're Syrian. I don't have a strong accent. I come from Aleppo, and Armenians do not have, let's say, they have a special accent. But they used to say, you're confusing between feminine and masculine, so you should be an Armenian, because in our language, we don't have a feminine or masculine. It's neutral language. So in our minds, we couldn't really formulate the Arabic language correctly. So once we spoke Arabic, they would know, like the majority of the people say, this person is Armenian. He's confusing between feminine and masculine.
Yeah. I think for my family in particular, we associate being Syrian with a lot of noise, I want to say, because there's always a hustle and bustle in Syria of traffic, of rooms in Syria are often filled with family, multiple generations of family living under one roof or sharing meals together. My family's from the village, so we sit on the floor, we eat together. There's the smell of the fruit trees and the smell of cigarette smoke. Those invite a nostalgia in me of home. And back in the day, my grandparents would leave their gate to their home open. There was no fear of theft. Syria was a very safe country, and it was truly a communal country. I mean, we'd be walking down the street, people that didn't know me or my family at all, they tell you "Meilu," which means come on in, like have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea. So those were the elements of being Syrian, and there was always a pride in me of being Syrian and Druze, because the Druze history in Syria is intricately tied with the Syrian history. I mean, one of our most revered leaders to this day, Sultan Bash al-Atrash, he was seen as a leader in the 1925 Great Revolt against the French. So we take a lot of pride in this because of its intimacy with Syria and that identity. Not just, we don't refer to it even in media. People talk about Jabal al-Druze. My family, we call it Jabal al-Arab. It's for everyone.
Yes. One of our listeners is asking you when you tell someone Mailu in Aleppo used to say Hawlu. It's the same word, but he's asking, would you serve them a mate, cafe, or tea, hookah, or cigarettes?
Meti constantly. I don't think there's ever any shortage of meti. I mean, even in these days where there's a shortage of everything, somehow people in Suweida still finding meti to drink.
Nice. I love mate. I have nothing against mate, but mate is very strong. Although I would say I drink a lot of coffee, and despite that, if I drink one glass of mate in the afternoon, my brain is awake the entire night, solving the entire Middle Eastern problems in my brain. I can't switch it off when I drink a mate, and I drink probably 5 to 6 shots of espresso per day, and despite that, the mate feels stronger to me. It's crazy. Hiba, if we go a little bit, let's say 13, 14 years back, when the first anti-Assad protests started, this was in March, April 2011. How did you personally interpret them at the time? What did you hope, let's say, they might change, and what worried you even then?
Well, so as I said, my family is from the village, the countryside in Syria. So there was, I saw the conditions that they were living in. Upward mobility was limited even before the war. Economic conditions were not great, particularly for people in the rural countryside. Syria was experiencing a drought, so a lot of people from the countryside had to move to the urban centers, and there was a sort of clash there. Um, so I had hoped for prosperity and more freedom. I remember a time, even for me as a child, where people would get nervous to say anything about the government. Um, so I wanted reform and I wanted freedoms for Syria. I don't think I saw that under the umbrella of regime change, because living and growing up in America, and coming from the background that I came from, of very prideful Syrians, it influenced everything that I do in my life. Politics and international relations have always been a part of my life and a part of my identity. So anytime I see um, the US in particular striving for something or really emphasizing something, I immediately view it with a degree of skepticism. Um, so I was hesitant to be behind any protests in Syria, but my father told me about a man named Haytham Manna, and he was talking about different reforms and change for Syria. He was a man that I respected and listened to.
Yes.
Um, so I had hoped that if perhaps there was some sort of change, perhaps he could be the leader of this change. And that very quickly changed for me. As I said, I viewed all sorts of pushes for regime change by the US. Anything that the US says, this person is this person is a dictator, drawing red lines, Obama's famous red line speech that he gave in Syria, uh, all of those things, the Arab Spring, all of that was viewed with hesitancy.
Yeah.
And then it very quickly changed for me. I
Yeah.
I wanted I wanted that freedom for Syrians and everyday Syrians, because again, I don't live there, so I don't live these realities, and I know even through my family members that they needed to see some types of economic reform and upward mobility, but not if it came at the price that it came.
One of the things which made me hesitant to join this so-called revolution, as you mentioned, is the insistence of these US, UK, France, German, and many other governments saying Assad should go, and all the time. And in my mind, I always drew parallels with Iraq, with Lebanon, with Palestine. And I'm asking myself if these regimes or this collective West has been a non-friendly, let's say, coalition against the people of the region, including the Iraqis, the Palestinians, the Lebanese. How can I reconcile with the fact that this time they're telling the truth, right? And they want the best for the Syrian people. This was really the most major, I would say, factor why I was so hesitant from the early days. There was another factor which I was very hesitant, and that is my focus was we need economic reform in this country, and these um, economic liberalization, basically abandoning the rural areas, as you mentioned, on the in favor of the bigger cities. Let's say it was a suicidal, or let's say the regime has shot itself in the leg, because the regime comes from a socialist background, and it has built its popularity and its legitimacy basically on having the support of the people in the rural areas. And starting from 2005, this economic liberalization, bringing more foreign investments into the major cities on the expense of the rural areas, definitely led into some resentment. And this is why most of the protesters or most of the insurgencies started from the rural areas against the major cities like Aleppo and Damascus. There was also one other thing, in my opinion, and that is probably, although I was young enough, but my father, being probably the most progressive and liberal father compared to other fathers which I met during my time in big industrial zones, and how they have this vertical relationship in the family itself. The father is the complete ruler, and we have a really patriarchal society. And I truly doubted that what the majority of the Syrians know what freedom is, like the political freedom in this case. And I come from a position also that if religion is playing an instrumental role in the society, people will always resort into religion to decide their electoral choices. And this has been proven in Egypt, and then Lebanon, for example, is the worst democratic system in the world, is a sectarian democracy. This is just my humble opinion. So I wanted more economic reform over political, let's say, freedoms. And now that the regime change happened, probably people have understood that having economic prosperity could solve lots of problems, societal problems in the country, something that the regime has failed to deliver. And of course, the opposition to Assad didn't allow him also to carry out any meaningful reforms, let's say, because they rejected negotiations to begin with. As I talk about Assad, maybe you would like to take us to the day you learned Assad has been ousted. This was on the 8th of December, 2024. Where were you? What ran through your mind first when you heard about the news, and what did your community in Suweida expect would happen next?
Well, first, before I even answer that question, because in listening to you talk, brought to my mind that people like you and I, and particularly people in countries that aren't under the sphere of influence of the West, like Syria was, we experience events in real time, and we experience time linearly. And I think that's something that often goes unnoticed, is that these superpowers, aside from having access to international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, and all of these NGOs that also they can utilize, aside from all of the power and influence that comes with being a superpower, they have the privilege of time. Um, historically, battles, you if you win a battle, you have the advantage of having the higher ground. And nowadays, I really think the big advantage for these superpowers is they have the advantage of time. They're planning things far in advance, before the local populations have even realized what's being done to them.
Yes.
Um, so in Syria, there was already, from the 40s and 50s, money being injected into the Muslim Brotherhood, and then after that, you have in 2011 leaked emails that they were trying to destabilize Syria, and 2006, there's cables from the US Embassy in Damascus talking about destabilizing Syria. So for me, and it sounds like for you too, that initial hope of economic reform quickly took a different role. And there was a fear of what if we got our economic reform, what also was it going to come with? Fast forward to Assad's ouster, or I guess his fleeing in the middle of the night. I remember at the time very, very vividly where I was. I was with my family. We were all gathered at my sister's because we tend to celebrate the holidays together. So we were all together when this happened. And my knee-jerk reaction was anger. I was very angry in the way that this takeover happened, because for those of us who had stood by the government not out of some like reverence for Assad or strong belief in him as a leader, we stood behind him as what he represented, which was the wholeness of Syria, wanting to keep the country together. And a lot of us suffered for that. You especially, I know, went through much because of that stance. And we got smeared, you're an Assadist, you're this, you're that. So for him to leave without any kind of address to his people, to the people that suffered the most for standing by him, that to me was angering. There was no ounce of joy in me for this at that time, which was even something that was different throughout my family. My family here and my family in Syria. I had family members that were hopeful. Of course, when you know the regime that you're dealing with, you hope that any change might bring something better. That's the case for all people everywhere. Everybody hopes that something they don't know might bring something better. So even within my own family, I remember having arguments that day because I was not in a celebratory mood. I was very fearful of what was to come. I was fearful of the balkanization of Syria. I knew the extremist elements that had long been rooted in Syria. So there was anger and there was fear of what was to come. And one of my initial fears was genuinely, one day when I go to see my family, will I have to go through Israeli checkpoints in order to do so because of Suweida's situation geographically and politically. So that was a real concern of mine right in the immediate aftermath.
I mean, the explanation you're giving is fascinating, which is I always wonder how this is the logical thinking, right? What you're expressing is when somebody is logical and connect the dots. This is the this is the outcome that somebody should come, and yet millions and millions and millions of people miss the point. And when you said like people pay the price for standing with the government or behind the government in this existential conflict, basically, the reason for the main reason was what you already expressed and said. We wanted a one united Syria, and we saw in Assad as a unifying persona during this conflict. If the president of Syria was anyone else, and his name was, I don't know, Muhammad, Ali, George, it doesn't matter for me. It doesn't matter. Yeah. For me, I saw that there are powers working to balkanize Syria, and I don't want to see that. And I stood behind this government and behind this army. Therefore, when the regime change happened, like, the problem is, and I hate to say this all the time, but it's like 3 weeks before the Julani attack on Aleppo, I wrote on X and I said, Julani is going to attack on Aleppo, and he's going to prove himself as being a contract army for the CIA and the United States. Literally happened 3 weeks later. And I remember when I posted this on X, the second day, a Syrian diplomat called me a senior one in Europe, and he said he didn't even see the post. He said, a Greek diplomat called me and said, Kevork has written something like this. How do you know that there is going to be an attack on Aleppo? And I said, they are saying, like, if you follow their platforms and if you watch what videos they're posting on Telegram, they are saying that they're going to attack Aleppo. It's not like my speculation. And he
Right.
says, yeah, this Greek diplomat was so worried because if a war restarts in Aleppo, Idlib, more refugees would come to Greece. This happened 3 weeks before this attack. And I cannot really believe that the army, the intelligence, and all these apparatuses that have been built for over 50 years, none of them were able to see this attack coming against Aleppo. And this was the end. Once Aleppo has fell, I think Russia and Iran, they came to the realization if they're going to liberate Aleppo again, they have to build up for months for a new military and offensive effort, and none of them have the appetite for it. So it was over when Aleppo fell. But for me, the biggest disappointment was, as you mentioned, and the anger when Assad fled the country. Now, some people say he didn't flee the country; he was forced to flee. Time will tell. History will tell what happened the last day. But definitely, I was so angry, and the way that this, without even one bullet, they're conquering the entire country. It just makes no sense to me. It looked like somebody has clicked a button and then everybody has just laid down the arms after 14 years. So why did we fight this? Why all these people suffered? Why hundreds of thousands of people died? And the people who put their lives at stake, in the front line, whether it is he's a soldier or he is a journalist or he is a commentator, whatever, people paid a huge price for that. And I want to say something for the people who think, or they accused you or others of being an Assadist and all these things. If people wanted to make money from Assad, they would have gone to Syria. There was a lots of business happening in the background during the war, and people made a lots of money for standing with Assad in Syria.
Yep.
But if you're outside and exiled and you want to make money, you join the opposition.
That's not the way. Yeah, that's not the way to go.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous. Anyways, I was really sad to see the Syrian people celebrating their demise, basically. And I wrote Syria as we know it is over, the second day of the regime change. And the sequences of events, unfortunately, have proven where Syria is headed now. Hibbah, maybe, yeah, please.
And also, I think for a lot of people that look at this conflict retrospectively and say, the power was concentrated with this sect or with this sect under Assad, I think, at the time, the way that I viewed it, at least, was that it was a class issue, not a sect issue. The power, the wealth was concentrated with the higher class in Syria. They made money off of different businesses, and he kept that wealth concentrated, like with his cousin Rami Makhlouf and those people. I don't think not because of religious reason, but because of familial ties, and then also just the history, the institutionalized history of Syria within those different sectors of business. It was a business class of people that was making money, and that business class, some of it still exists to this day. So
they paid ransoms to the Julani regime to stay in the country, and they continue their businesses. For many people to understand, the Syrian regime the Assad regime was based on loyalty. Like, if you're loyal, it doesn't matter what religion or sect you are, you will be accepted into the system. If you are running against the system, if you're an Alawite, you will be even persecuted more than a Sunni. You will be the first to be persecuted, right?
and if we're talking just a purely numbers game, I mean, Syria is a majority Sunni country, so it on pure numbers, the majority of that wealth is going to be concentrated with the majority of the country, based off of who's purchasing the loyalty in the government.
True. Maybe you could help our listeners understand the horror you documented this last July in Suweida, the hospital raid, public killings, including students forced off a balcony, and sexual violence against women. Beyond the immediate loss of life, what message did those acts send to the Druze communities about their place in Syria?
That they had no place
Mm.
in the current Syria, in the current formulation of Syria. It sent a very strong message that wherever a Druze person might be, and not just Druze people, any minority, um, and not just minorities either. There, of course, there are secular Sunnis in Syria. There are also Sunnis afraid to speak out. You know, it, for the Druze, at least we're armed, but a lot of these other groups are not armed. So speaking out or saying anything comes at a direct cost of your life, which is a price, of course, nobody wants to pay. So the events of July that happened to the Druze community sent a very strong message that under this current government and this formulation, there is no ability to coexist, and a massive distrust was born out of that. I mean, during the war, the Suweida province hosted at least, people from at least 14 different provinces.
Yes.
And now they're looking at a situation where you have like Deir ez-Zor and or excuse me, not Deir ez-Zor, Dira, people coming from Dira. There was a massive distrust. These are neighbors. We've been working together. A lot of people want to point to the differences and the tension that happened with the Bedu, and that also ignores the fact that a lot of the time we had good relations with the Bedu. They would come to us, we would go to them. But when you have an extremist government and Takfiri groups in all sectors across the state, it's like you said, all of this sectarian violence comes to the forefront, and you lose trust with one another, and you lose trust with that Arab identity that had been so intimately tied to being Syrian.
Yep.
As like the last bastion of uh, what the Ba'ath Party was initially supposed to conceptualize, which is like this pan-Arab unity that
Yeah.
was gone.
And for the people, just to give you context, guys, this was not just a theory in Syria. Like, the Palestinians were treated as equal citizens. They have the right to own a property. They used to work and also study free as any other Syrian person. Somebody comes from Sudan is the same. Somebody comes from Egypt is the same. So if you were from the Arab world and you come to Syria, you could have a resident permit and you could work and you could work and also benefit from the free education and back then also the healthcare in Syria. And I have many Palestinian friends in the country. Now that the Julani regime has taken over, he abolished this, and now the Palestinians are considered foreigners again in the country, and they could not benefit from what the previous regime has provided them. I would like to show our audience a photo, which is this photo could shake mountains. Basically, I have seen this video of the Julani regime thugs basically shaving this old man's mustache. Hibbah, for people unfamiliar with Druze culture, why is the mustache such a loaded symbol, and what did its forced shaving by the Julani thugs communicate about humiliation and dominance? I have seen countless videos of them shaving men's mustaches.
Yeah, so for the mustache in the Druze community is both a religious symbol and a cultural one. Religious symbol because those highest esteemed people in our community, like the sheikh, or people that have, in Arabic we say "stalamu dinon," means they've openly embraced the religion. They're allowed more information. They're highly respected in the community. The the mustache represents that distinguishing factor of this person in the Druze community has access to more religious knowledge and is someone that is highly respected. This is someone you can look to. Culturally, its significance dates back many years. I brought up Sultan Bash al-Atrash earlier in the show. He's always portrayed with his thick, heavy mustache, and it was used by many of our fighters and seen as a true symbol of manhood, of dignity, of these moral rights of fighting for your country and for your people. So to shave the mustaches of Druze men is emasculating, and it strikes right at the heart of their Druze identity. It truly cuts at the fabric of what it means to be Druze, because it's something that our men wear with pride, and it represents them as warriors and as religious respected leaders.
There is another video which I watched, and I think this was also a game changer for me. I'm not even a Druze, but when I watched this video, I think this was another game changer in the series of different events which happened in Syria in the past years. The video which at gunpoint, the thugs of Julani are asking an elderly man what if he is a Muslim or he is a Druze. And he says, my brother, I'm a Syrian. And then they shoot him, and several of them, they shoot him and kill him. I mean, how is it possible after watching such footage for a Syrian Druze to consider himself or herself a Syrian, right? Like this creates an identity crisis among the people when they are being killed for saying, I'm Syrian, and they're saying, what does even Syrian mean? Are you a Muslim or are you a Druze? And somebody says, he's a Druze, he's a Druze. I just checked his national ID, and they open fire on him.
Right. I mean, it even causes an identity crisis in myself. Because, like I said, it was never just I'm Druze, it was I am Druze of Syria. That held a special importance, that held a special meaning for the Druze community. We were proud to be Syrians. We were proud to stand against Western influence. We're a very prideful people. So to undergo this type of humiliation from your own countrymen, I was in communication with my family at the times that they were able to access communication. My cousins that were studying in Damascus had to flee when students started being attacked. My cousin's husband was killed, and her son, who is outside of the country, was sent videos and images of his father post-mortem, his body completely desecrated, with threats that if you come back, this is what awaits you. So, a lot of us in the beginning of the revolution, we talked about the foreign fighters. You had like 9,000 people from Central Asia and Russia flooding Middle Eastern countries and fighting with Islamic banners. And then you had like 5,000 Uyghurs in Syria alone. So that snapshot changed in the aftermath of what happened in July, because it was no longer foreign fighters. It was your neighbors. One of my other cousins, she thought, these people are my friends. They're leaving laugh reacts on that video of the 3 students that were held at gunpoint and forced to jump off the balcony. She knew those people.
Wow.
And people were making fun of her for mourning those losses. We had a 12-year-old girl that was raped. We had people's homes being burnt. There was a lot. I witnessed and saw a lot of videos of a type of barbarism that you know, my brain cannot even comprehend to take a knife to somebody's neck post-mortem and just hack away at it for what seemed like was the fun of it for these
Fun.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
It's a
fun.
sadism. It's a psychopathy.
Right. And we saw that, you know, throughout the war too, of like chopping people's heads and all of that. Those same elements were present, and it was barbaric. It was horrifying, and it continues to this day. I mean, there are deliberate fires being set in Homs countryside. Some villages entirely wiped of their native populations, um, and the horrors continue. And it truly creates a situation. You know, all of this stuff is on social media, right? That's part of what makes this situation so hard to recover and heal from, is that not only are people targeting you in your native language, in your native tongue, and these are people you know, right? These aren't foreign fighters. And people that had celebrated the ouster of Assad now completely silent in a
Mhm.
lot of circles. Uh, this creates a situation that's untenable. You can't live with this. People are constantly exposed to these videos. You know,
No.
if you think you've moved on, you just look up Druze on Google and you'll see the image of that sheikh that you pulled up, the students jumping off of the balcony, the hospital scene where that man tries to defend his colleagues and he's immediately shot dead. All of these videos are out there now.
And the thing is, the justifications are always ready. If you see on social media how many of the supporters of Julani justify these killings under different factors, like, oh, he put his hand on the gun of the Syrian army. So there is no Syrian army. Excuse me, those are militias. And they're trying to create pretexts. Like there is an unarmed doctor or somebody in the hospital being shot dead, and you have like an army of influencers on X and other places trying to justify it and find different excuses for such heinous crimes. And this is something I wanted to raise with you, since you also mentioned that those are not just foreigners, right? Those are people we know, and you know, those are your neighbors, friends, and in the neighborhood probably they have carried arms and they killed your people in your community. And this is a post I saw yesterday which just resonates with your thoughts. This person says, Muhammad was with me at school in middle school, and he was my friend and neighbor. He was very kind, and he had inclinations toward art. And by the way, Muhammad is the son of a family and people. Like he means like he's coming from a respected family. Muhammad studied in Christian schools and lived in areas most of which are from minorities. What more do you want than that he was my friend? A while ago, I discovered that Muhammad was in the coastal cities with this equipment. He means with this weapon, he was in the coast. Uh, it is mind-boggling, right? And those are the
Mm-hmm.
people whom we lived with our entire lives.
Yeah.
I remember during my university days at Kalamun University, like I truly didn't see these moral differences between me and others, right? I lived among everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
and in 2005, 2006, I swear to God, I was ignorant about what is Sunni, what is Shia, what is Alawi, what is Druze. I didn't even know what are these sects, right? I had no clue. But I lived among everyone, and we fasted together during Ramadan, and we went out together, we ate together the shawarma, and we visited Damascus all the time. We spoke about all things, everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when the war started, they turned against me only because I was an ethnic Armenian. You know, this factor itself
Yeah.
is heartbreaking for me, because people come and say, you're not a Syrian, don't speak about Syria, go back to Armenia. Such an ignorant thing to say, right? But the worst is when you know someone who was really a good person and then he carries arms to fight. What could change in somebody's head to become a monster all of a sudden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. That's the heartbreaking part, as you said, and that caused the crisis of identity, because before all of this, I would have never, I don't believe in raising any kind of religious flag within the borders of Syria. Now the Druze flag is being raised in the southern province of the Suweida, which I wouldn't blame anyone living there for this. I'm speaking purely as someone with the privilege of being far away. I viewed the previous Syrian flag as my flag.
Yeah.
And today I would not raise the current flag that exists for the Syrian state, even though, at the time of my grandfather's service in the military, that was his flag. That's the flag in which he served. But for me, the previous flag is not a representation of the Assad government, which I understand it might be for people that suffered under that flag. But for me, it was a symbol of unity, of pan-Arabism, which is something that like I said, I was raised with. And now, I have people within my own family and community members that tell me all the time, how are we supposed to live with our neighbors after this? What are we meant to do? They're backed into a corner. What is the future meant to look like after this?
Yeah. I think many people also in the pro-Julani camp do not even know that this flag was first adopted during the time of the unity between Syria and Egypt. They think this is the Assad's regime flag. This is why I say, when I said it's such an ignorant thing to say, go back to Armenia, because these people do not even know that we didn't come from Armenia. We came from Gilicia. We were in southern Ottoman Empire, or today's current day Turkey. We were in Kilis, Gaziantep, in eastern Anatolia. Those places were over 2 million Armenians who were living there, right? We didn't come from current day Armenia, but somebody comes and say, go back to your country, Armenia, or this flag represents the Assad regime. And this is how one day, this is a story, one day I will write a book about my experiences in Germany with this type of people. It's hilarious because I was walking in the street and somebody came and I don't know this person, and he asked me in Arabic if I have a lighter with me. And why would somebody speak Arabic to me if this person doesn't know me, right? You're in Germany. So I instantly knew that he's Syrian. And I said, I don't smoke. I don't have a lighter. And I continued walking, and he held my hands, and he pulled my hand, and he said, aren't you the guy who was raising the Assad regime's flag near the Brandenburger Gate? And I was the naive in me, like I'm going to discuss someone in the street. And I said, this is not the flag of the Assad regime. This is the flag of the Syrian Arab Republic, which was adopted under the time of the unity between Egypt and Syria. And this guy just like he stood like this, and he put his hand in his small bag near his chest, and he pulled something from his bag, and he started running after me. So and in we are not idiots.
Yeah.
And when somebody does like this and pulls something, of course that something probably is a weapon. So I ran for my life. But then this person claimed to my lawyer, because he sued me. He sued me
sued you.
He sued me because I made up false allegations against him, according to his lawyer, that he's an Islamist and he was carrying a gun. He said no, he was just taking off his smartphone to make a video. And I have never seen anybody takes a smartphone like this and runs after someone.
And then run after you. Yeah.
And run after you. Yeah. Anyways, I think the ignorance plays a major role among, especially historical ignorance of the region and what Syria means, how many civilizations have passed through Syria, and what makes Syria Syria. What makes somebody Syrian? Your identity, my identity, is intertwined. We lived in a similar region. We lived under similar, let's say, civilizations, empires, occupations. We had similar experiences in the past. But many people, in my opinion, after when the war started in Syria, the timeline as if it starts there, or it starts by the Assad, Hafez Assad's regime. Like before that, there was no history, and the bad history started from there, and now we have to fix that 50 years. Excuse me, there is a 450 years beyond that, which was Ottoman occupation and complete political hibernation of these societies here in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, where people didn't see any political freedoms, didn't live any political democracy, let's say. So the culture of democracy doesn't really exist yet in this country. It's a process. There have to be a process to develop that. Anyways, everything was blamed on the Assad regime. I understand some people would like to make this about sectarianism in order to mobilize as many people as possible, that it's a very strong force. But now we are in 2025. Syria is led by a figure as the former head of Al-Qaeda franchise in Syria. Looking back, did you ever imagine someone like Julani would sit atop the post-Assad order, and how did you feel when he spoke in the United States, in the UN General Assembly?
There's a lot to unpack there. I think, being from Syria, you hope to never imagine someone like that leading your country. So there was a bit of maybe naiveness in me to not imagine that. But as the war progressed, and there was no shortage of extremist figureheads, that started to become more of a reality. And I think now, looking back at it, I think there was never any hope for it to be truly an organic revolution, given all of the external forces acting upon Syria. And like I said, these powerful superpowers had the privilege of planning for this far in advance. I mean, like I mentioned, the 40s, the 50s, the social warfare campaign by Obama, utilizing different tech giants to run false, fake personas online and manipulate conversations. You had a Jared Cohen, the director of ideas for Google, running a defection tracker, trying to manipulate people that were defecting and getting them to join the so-called Free Syrian Army. That was basically Jabhat al-Nusra right from the outset. So it's like a weird cognitive dissonance even in myself, because I didn't want to imagine it. I knew Syria as a safe place, as a place that you've talked about on your show as being a true place of coexistence. So I didn't want to imagine that it would come to something like exactly what it came to, but there came a point in time where it was impossible to deny that that was the track that we were on. And someone like Julani was going to be the leader of this new Syria. And being in America, I look at Americans, fellow Americans, how are you taking this in, that the day after 9/11, the US is hosting an Al-Qaeda figurehead. He came the day after 9/11. He was hosted by Petraeus, who has in the past, worked on information technologies through US Central Command to manipulate the events in Syria. I mean, this is a man, Julani, who has said he was inspired by the 9/11 attacks, and he's being hosted by the US. People, friends of ours, fellow Syrians that we've been friends with for many years, are celebrating this. I mean, I think the most comical thing probably is sometimes you have to laugh in order to get through this stuff.
Yep.
Is I see people putting pictures on their Facebook, their cover and their profile pictures of Julani on a horse. You know, as if he's like this prideful leader. And look, you know, rather than chopping heads these days, he's playing basketball and
Billiard.
yeah, and billiards and being revered almost by US leadership. I mean, Petraeus's portrayal and conversation with him was like of one of reverence.
Mhm.
So me as a Druze person, you know, now I can't even go to my home country, a country that I'm a dual citizen of. I can't go and visit my family, but the uh, leader of the Al Qaeda branch in Syria can travel freely and be hosted by the so-called free countries of the world.
I cannot visit the United States.
Right.
But Julani can.
But Julani can't, and we welcome him with open arms. Perhaps even we'll gift him a horse next time he comes to visit.
What about the Syrian community in the US received Jolani with? Was it like is it a correct picture what we watched, or this was just in the press? Like many people from the Syrian community received Jolani. They went to his meeting. They took selfies with him. Some of whom are from the minority communities, right? I don't want to name names, but there were people like influential people standing behind
If
him.
you look, you'll find them. Yeah, no, there were Syrian community members that were in that room with him and were celebratory of his visit. And there are people that deny his ties to Al Qaeda. There are people that say, you know, people can change, you
But
know.
those are liberal people, like those were liberal
Yeah, yeah,
people not covering their heads, and they just like
no, nope. I think they see through him maybe a period of Western influence that maybe some people are longing for, that they see in other Middle Eastern countries. You know, if you're allied with the West, um, they look at Egypt and Jordan and those countries, and maybe they see that as an opportunity for them. But I know the Druze organization here went out in protest when he visited,
hmm.
and there was the Syrian group that's based out of the U.S. that was happy for his visit. So again, you know, it's like when people talk about Syria, it's never a monolith. There are conflicting voices across communities. Um, so there were people celebrating his visit. And like I said, there are a lot of Syrians in America that have the privilege of safety that still have not made any mention of the minorities that he's slaughtering. So
I don't know. I truly don't know what to say, and some of them are from the minority communities. Hiba, if I want to end up this conversation with you with a final question, what is one personal snapshot, a text you received, a conversation with your relative, a video you watched that you wish every Western newsroom would have to confront before they report on Suweida?
I think in terms of video, uh, I urge people to look at the videos of, like I said, I mentioned the barbarity of what kind of human it takes to hack away at the head of someone. And this isn't one isolated video. It's many videos that I watched in gathering this evidence. People's heads being ran over by cars, you know, similar to the barbarity that we see in Gaza, what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians. Um, that type of barbarity, I don't think that's something that I will ever get past. And doing it with a smile on your face, under the banner of the General Security Forces, with an ISIS patch on your arm, um, and you're doing this to people that even don't have weapons, that have fully tried to comply with you, and you're mass executing them. And then, on a personal note, many of my family members said goodbye to us throughout these events. They did not know if they were going to live or die. So I received voice messages from family members, telling me goodbye. We don't know if we'll ever see you again, and apologizing to us if they've ever done any disservice to us. We're sorry, and we just wanted to exist. We just wanted to exist with dignity and with pride, and that was taken away from them, and now they can't even leave the Suweida province.
Guys, imagine the gravity of the issue. Imagine the trauma that people passed through, who lived these experiences, who watched these experiences, and also imagine the people who have beloved ones in Syria, whether in Suweida, whether in Latakia, whether in Tartus, whether in Aleppo, whether in Damascus, whether in Homs, Hama. Every day there are executions. Over 11,000 people were killed since the regime change happened. So this is in 10 months, 11,000, more than 1,000 people per month, many of whom were killed, summarily executed for being born in the wrong religion. We have witnessed very sadistic, heinous crimes and videos every day. And this only proves what I tried to really explain since 2017 on this channel, and now Hibbah has reiterated. Unfortunately, we want for the West to play an honest role. But these experiences that we have been through nowadays proves the following, that they don't care about human rights in Syria. And if human rights was the first element, or one in the top 10 of their interests, they would not have brought someone like Julani to power in Syria and allowed him to commit all these massacres, and then whitewash these massacres and say, we trust in the government's investigations. The government itself, or the so-called government itself, committed these crimes. How do you trust the government or the regime to investigate itself? And I've seen the special envoys of the UK, Germany, the EU, Italy, US continue showing support to the Julani regime despite all these atrocities. So ask yourself this question: what does that tell you about the foundation of the foreign policies of these countries? Do they really care about us? And when I say us as Syrian people, 24 million people, right? Or they are going to be selective about their human rights in order to advance their geopolitical interests and financial interests. And this is why many people stood against the so-called revolution as we started our conversation today, because we don't trust that be Obama, Clinton, Keir Starmer nowadays, or Macron, or Annalena Baerbock, or all these politicians, in our eyes, they don't have any integrity, and we don't believe that they're being honest with us about their intentions. And we warned against this, and many people were smeared and were called names. People lost like from their family members, they lost friends and family. They suffered psychologically, their health has deteriorated, people lost money, people lost scholarships for standing against this wave of barbarism in Syria. So in my opinion, those who are watching now, especially in the United States, it is important nowadays, guys, to move beyond watching on social media. Watching on social media, making some noise won't change the situation in the country. There is a rift in the US administration. There are two wings nowadays that they don't know how to deal with Syria. Some of whom say we have to give everything to Julani and then we hand over this file to Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. That would be the worst case scenario for everyone in Syria, that we have a centralized regime giving them all the absolute powers and the military. They will subjugate the people for decades to come. It's not like Julani going to leave tomorrow or in 2 years. If something like this happens, like Tom Barak is planning, then the rest of the Syrian people, and believe me, Julani probably has 20% of full support of the people. Some of them are just in a herd community. They follow what other people are doing. But if the tilt shifts, people shift, and this will expose the how volatile the Julani regime is. We are not calling for balkanization. However, at the same time, there is a third way. The third way is, if you're going to create a centralized government, then we need to have a figure who is capable of treating everybody with respect, right? We're not asking for maximum, we're asking for the minimum bare, and this is respect for human dignity, which means the Julani regime has to go, and in his place, there has to be a figure, whether this is a civil figure or a military figure, who can treat the people with respect and give the people their rights, their social rights, religious rights, community rights, and some economic development. You know, people are not asking for much, but this regime is here doing exactly what the premise of the Syrian revolution was about, and that is dignity, freedom, and democracy, right? And none of which he just did the opposite of everything that this so-called revolution was built upon. So
with our free elections.
Free elections, like today somebody asked me, I had an interview, asked me, so how do you describe the Syrian elections? And I said, you know this meme that somebody stands in front of a cupboard and trying to explain them this complicated situation? It is Julani appointing 70 members by himself, and then he appoints a committee, and this committee creates subcommittees, consist of 7,000 people or so, and they elect the members of this people's assembly. So basically everything is under Julani regime's control. So there is a way, the third way, right? Not balkanization and not giving everything to Julani. So if you're in the US, I think your representatives should listen to this type of conversation. We have to move beyond watching. Political activism is also important. These Julani people are meeting with Joe Wilson and everyone in the US Senate and House, and they're urging them to now lift the sanctions against Julani. They themselves were the ones who imposed the sanctions on the Syrian people. Now they say they hurt the Syrian people. So these lobbyists should not really have a free pass for what they did. They have done enough damage. This would be my final thoughts. Do you want to say something, Hibbah, before we end up this conversation?
I just also want to, if for any Americans watching this, you know, this is what our government is supporting, and they're counting on all of the propaganda they used during the war, making all of the sending all the convoluted messages of different groups that fought in Syria to confuse you, send you mixed messages. And so make no mistake, we are openly inviting and communicating with someone that was the leader of Al-Qaeda, and some of your tax money is going to support this man. And I just want to end by saying that, you know, although the situation in Suweida is nothing like the forced starvation that's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, Suweida is under siege.
Yes.
And with the winter coming, shortages that already exist of gas, fuel, food, all of this, it's very important that we continue talking about this, not just on social media, like you said, but trying to open corridors so that people can get the necessary means to live.
Survival means, basically.
Yeah, basic survival.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have walked through the story tonight, a story of memory, loss, and identity. Together with Hibbah Jarmakani, we revisited what it meant to grow up as a Syrian before the war, to feel a sense of belonging and hope, and how all of that began to unravel when sectarian violence and foreign intervention tore the country apart. We spoke about the Druze community in Suweida, their resilience in the face of humiliation and terror, the crimes that targeted them, and the spiritual and cultural wounds that are still open today. We also explored the question at the heart of it all, what it means to still call yourself Syrian when everything around you has changed. If you found value in today's analysis, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and especially if you know your representative in the United States, that would be a great help. This small action truly helped the Syrian people, my friends, and it could be considered part of a political activism and lobbying. Thank you once again for tuning in, whether on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing Board, and special thanks to Hibbah for joining us today. Until next time, this is Kevork Almassian of Syriana Analysis. Stay informed, stay critical, and see you in the next stream. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.